I talk 9 languages, proclaimed the black cleaning lady's son. Arab billionaire laughed but was startled. Ha ha, 9 languages. The peals of Hassan al-Mansuri's laughter resonated in the Manhattan penthouse office like a predator's growl, laughing at its prey. Kid, you can hardly speak English. David Johnson, only 14 years old, stood in the plush office clutching a tattered public school backpack, his gaze firm in contrast to the shame scorching his cheeks. Next to him, his mother, Grace Johnson, 42, grasped a bucket of cleaning supplies with shaking hands, aware she had made a grievous error in bringing her son to the office. Hassan al-Mansuri, 48-year-old oil magnate and proprietor of a $3.5 billion empire, was enjoying the most fun day he'd had in weeks. This young black man, son of his maid, had just asserted that he spoke 9 languages when Hassan challenged him to read a whole book in English. David, apologize to Mr. al-Mansuri, Grace whispered, her voice suffocated by years of submission and terror of losing the job that fed her 2 children alone. No need to apologize, Hassan said, enjoying himself more. I want to listen to more of this fantasy. Tell me, boy wonder, what are these 9 languages you speak? David breathed deeply. At 14, he had already learned that the world judged individuals like him and his mother without even knowing them. Son of a cleaning lady, black, from the Bronx, all descriptions that men like Hassan used to rationalize their disdain. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, and Portuguese, David answered quietly, every word uttered with such clarity that Hassan ceased laughing for a second. Liar, Hassan said, walking back to his Italian marble desk. Grace, your son has some bad fantasy issues. Perhaps you should take him to a psychiatrist rather than bring him here. Grace dipped her head, bearing the brunt of accustomed humiliation. For 5 years, she had cleaned that office, tolerated scornful remarks, and collected low pay since she needed that job. But to see her son, her bright and gritty David, made fun of in this manner was a hurt that was more piercing than any personal slight. Mom, David whispered, putting a hand on her arm. It's all right. Hassan observed the exchange with a sadistic grin. He enjoyed these times of pure power when he could be a reminder of their place in society. He had established his kingdom not only through fiscal brilliance, but through a deliberate ruthlessness that annihilated anyone who dared to oppose him. You know what I believe, Grace? Hassan reclined in his $15,000 leather armchair. I believe your son is envious of my executive's children who go to pricey private schools, so he creates these fantasies to feel special. Sir David cut in, still calm but with a dignity that took Hassan aback. Do you know Arabic? Hassan scowled. Of course I do. It's the language I was born with. Then you would know if I said or essay al-Hakika. The silence that ensued was uproariously loud. Hassan gazed at David, taking in the flawless words in ancient Arabic he had just uttered. This was not the fundamental Arabic that any tourist would memorize. It was a sophisticated structure with intricate grammar and flawless diction. Grace gazed from her son to Hassan, feeling that something was different in the atmosphere, but not knowing what David had said. Where did you hear that? Hassan asked, truly bewildered for the first time in years. David smiled for the first time since entering that office. At the public library, sir, they offer free language courses each afternoon. Hassan experienced something odd churning inside of his chest, a blend of shock and something that might be respect. No, that was not possible. He was merely a child who had learned to memorize a few sentences. Anybody can memorize a sentence, Hassan said, attempting to reassert his control. That does not make you speak the language. You're correct, sir, David concurred. That's why I've brought this. David unzipped his frayed backpack and produced a paper that caused Hassan to gasp. It was a legitimate certificate of expertise in several languages obtained from Columbia University, with marks showing fluency in all the 9 languages. David had said that's not real. Hassan stuttered, but the tone in his voice was no longer as sure. David pulled out another document. This is my Advanced Linguistics Program certificate at the Municipal Library, and this is for the online simultaneous translation course, which I completed last month. Hassan took the papers with shaking hands. They were all genuine, all stamped and signed by credible institutions. This 14-year-old boy, son of his cleaning lady, had acquired an education level equivalent to professional diplomats. How was all Hassan could mutter. Something that Hassan didn't know was that David Johnson had a larger secret than merely knowing 9 languages. and that secret was going to ruin everything that Hassan believed about intelligence, merit, and the real worth of individuals. If you're interested in learning how a 14-year-old boy was able to outwit a billionaire and wish to know what horrible secret he was still keeping, remember to subscribe to the channel. What Hassan didn't know was that David hadn't appeared at that office coincidentally. For months, he had been planning this moment, gathering information and preparing a demonstration that would not only change Hassan's perception of him, but reveal a truth about Hassan himself that would destroy everything the billionaire thought he knew about himself. Hassan examined the certificates for several minutes, desperately searching for some evidence of forgery. But the more he searched, the more his pride became something akin to panic. The signatures were genuine, the stamps authentic, the dates coherent with a 3-year intellectual development. That does not necessarily prove anything yet, Hassan muttered more to David than anyone. Anyone can take courses online. You're right, David nodded in affirmation with a composure that increased Hassan's unease. That's why I brought this. David pulled out a tablet from his backpack and opened a video chat application. In a matter of seconds, the screen displayed an Asian woman in an office in a university setting. Professor Chin, David said in flawless Mandarin, could you verify to Mr. Al-Mansuri my performance in your business translation course? The woman on the screen responded in quick, fluent Mandarin. Hassan hadn't a clue, but he could sense the natural rhythm of the exchange, the richness of the grammatical patterns, the facility with which David shifted between registers. Mr. Al-Mansuri, the professor changed to English. David is my top student in 15 years of teaching. At 14, he speaks Mandarin like a native Beijing speaker. He is amazing. Hassan slammed down the phone, his hands trembling slightly. Grace, he said, his voice queasily, did you have any idea of this? Grace shook her head, trying to keep up with what was happening. David has always been intelligent, sir, but I had no idea he 3 years. David cut in gently. I began at age 11. My mother was working 2 jobs to support my private school education, but she lost her second job due to the pandemic. When I returned to public school, the material was too easy. Therefore, I thought I would do something constructive in my spare time. Hassan had a knot in his stomach. While his own kids went to the priciest schools in New York with private, hourly paid tutors, this boy had outdone any education money could provide using only the public libraries and determination. But why languages? Hassan asked, truly wondering for the first time. Because I wanted to know about the world, David answered plainly. And because I learned that if you talk to people in terms of their own language, they no longer regard you as a stranger, but begin to regard you as human. The realization struck Hassan like a blow to the gut. For years, he'd been using his Arab heritage as a reason to maintain distance from American workers, invoking cultural differences while the truth was plain old arrogance. David Hassan spoke deliberately. You're 14, sir. That can't possibly be, sir. David finally smiled since he'd gotten there. The impossible is only the possible that has yet to occur. Hassan spun around, gazing at Grace for the first time in 5 years. What he saw was a woman who'd supported a genius by working menial labor, who'd given up everything to provide her son with opportunities. David, Hassan said, his tone changing, why did you travel here today? Your mother stands to lose her job. David shared a look with Grace, who barely nodded. Because I overheard you on the phone yesterday, David replied calmly. You were negotiating a contract in Arabic with Middle Eastern investors, but you made errors which can cost millions. Hassan blanched. What types of errors? You used Mubashir when you ought to have used for urgency, and you got mixed up with Muraik and Muraib when talking about deadlines. Little errors that totally altered the sense. Hassan sat down heavily. Those investors had appeared perplexed on the call, but he had thought it was due to connection issues. In reality, his language errors had almost ruined a $50 million deal. How did you realize that I was having errors? Hassan inquired. Because I have been taking business Arabic for 2 years, David answered. It's my expertise. Hassan stared at David with different eyes. This teenager was a global business communicator expert at age 14. David, Hassan spoke slowly. You saved my business without me realizing it. As a matter of fact, David replied, reaching into his backpack and pulling out another document. I did a bit more than that. Hassan accepted the paper. It was a comprehensive proposal for reorganizing the company's international communications, pointing out linguistic errors that had cost them contracts, and proposing specific remedies. You analyzed my company, Hassan whispered. Public communications only, David explained. Press releases, transcripts, online documents. I discovered patterns of error that account for lost business. Hassan read it twice. It was genius, exhaustive, and worth hundreds of millions in recovered contracts. Why did you do that? Hassan asked, bewildered. David took a breath. Because I wanted to demonstrate to you that value is not your parents' money, it is what you can bring. Hassan felt something shatter inside him. For so long he had thought that one was born to be successful, that only class allowed for intelligence. This child had totally destroyed that theory. Hassan al-Mansuri, David mentioned, employing his first use of his full name. May I ask you a question? Hassan nodded. If a child like me can accomplish this with public libraries, what would other kids like me do with the same rights your children have? The question also remained in the air like a grenade waiting to explode. Hassan didn't realize that David's demonstration was only the beginning, because concealed in that battered-up backpack was evidence that would prove that Hassan lost million-dollar contracts, not due to linguistic deficiency, but for something far more heinous. And David was on the verge of applying that proof in a manner that would irrevocably alter the dynamics of power in that office. Hassan was chewing on David's devastating question when the boy produced one final thing from his backpack. A small digital recorder which made the billionaire's blood curdle. Before I reply your question, David replied in a calm tone, I have to show you something. David clicked play. Hassan's characteristic voice occupied the office. These black Americans are all the same. Lazy, illiterate, always blaming others for their failure. That is why I only employ Arabs and whites on major roles. Grace's mouth was covered in shock. Hassan paled. Where did you tape this? Hassan stuttered. In the elevator last week, David responded flatly. You were discussing with your vice president the policy of hiring. You didn't see I was there. Hassan recalled it word for word. He had ridden down with Robert Chun debating why they did not move black employees to executive rank. He believed they were in private. That's against the law. You can't tape off-the-record conversations. Hassan blew his top. New York is an opt-in state, David responded matter-of-factly, totally legal. And given the fact that it records widespread racial discrimination, I'm quite certain that the Labor Department would be extremely interested. Hassan's mind reeled. This kind of recording could ruin his company, cost him $1 million in lawsuits, destroy his reputation for life. What do you want? Hassan breathed. David smiled, but it wasn't a boyish smile. It was the smile of a man who had outthought every single move in this game of chess. I want you to decide, David said, going over to Hassan's desk. You may keep on thinking that human beings like me and my mother are second-class citizens, and this recording will sit on the desk of every reporter and labor attorney in New York. Hassan gulped. Or show that you actually learned something today. I want you to give my mom a promotion to facility supervisor with a salary of $80,000 per year. I want a scholarship scheme for the youth from low-income communities. And I want you to employ me as a junior language consultant. You're only 14 years old, Hassan complained, and I can speak 9 languages better than most adults you know, David shot back. And I've already shown I can save your company millions. Hassan gazed at Grace, who said nothing, but whose eyes sparkled with pride and a dignity he had never seen her display. Grace, Hassan spoke, his voice cracking. You raised a genius. I raised a man, Grace responded staunchly. A man who recognizes his own value and won't be treated as less than. David pulled a contract from his backpack. I've already drawn up the terms. You have 5 minutes to make your decision before this recording comes out. Hassan signed the contract with shaking hands. It was thorough, expert, and had provisions that safeguarded David and Grace from future reprisals. The kid had thought of everything. How do I know you won't release the recording even if I sign? Hassan asked. Because unlike you, David said, staring Hassan directly in the eye, I do believe in second chances for people who really want to change. Hassan read the contract again. The terms were reasonable, even conservative, given the value David could bring to the company. But signing meant acknowledging that he had been wrong in every way. "What if I don't sign?" Hassan asked, already well aware of the answer. David pulled out his cell phone. "This tape goes to the New York Times, CNN, and the Attorney General's office in exactly." He glanced at his watch. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "You're blackmailing me," Hassan said. "I'm offering you justice," David replied. "You've spent years profiting from an unfair system. Now you get the opportunity to be part of the solution." Hassan gazed out the window at Manhattan, the city he had won over with a combination of cunning and brutal mercilessness. But this child had topped him on both accounts just now. "Grace," Hassan whispered softly, "do you take the promotion?" Grace glanced at David, who nodded in encouragement. "I accept, sir." Hassan took up a pen of solid gold and signed the contract. "David Johnson," he said, "you just taught me the most valuable and most costly lesson of my life." "What lesson?" David inquired. "That genuine intelligence has nothing to do with where you were born or the amount of money in your pocket. It has everything to do with what you do with the chances you generate for yourself." David stashed the tape recorder and extended his hand to Hassan. "Welcome to the 21st century, Mr. Al-Manshari." Hassan grasped the boy's hand, sensing that he was making something much more significant than a mere employment agreement. He was consenting to view the world with entirely different eyes. David did something no one could have anticipated at that moment. He pulled out 2 additional recorders from his backpack. "To your knowledge," David informed matter-of-factly, "everything that transpired here today was also recorded, including you signing this contract of your own free will." Hassan finally laughed for years. Not a sadistic laugh, but a laugh of real appreciation. "You're amazingly intelligent, boy." "No," said David with a smile. "I simply studied harder." Hassan believed that he had been taught the greatest lesson of his existence, but David had a final surprise that would uncover not just the depth of his preparation, but also a mystery about Hassan's own history that would upend everything the billionaire believed he knew about his own beginnings and what merit really was. 6 months later, Hassan al-Mansouri was sitting at a round table in the Bronx Public Library, surrounded by young people from disadvantaged communities who were participating in the scholarship program David had demanded. The man who once saw public libraries as symbols of failure now considered them true centers of educational excellence. Mr. al-Mansouri questioned Maria, a 15-year-old Latina girl. "Is it true that David became hired on at age 14 by blackmailing you?" Hassan laughed. "Really? It's true, and it was the best that ever happened to me." David, aged 15 now and the youngest language consultant in American corporate history, observed from the bench beside him, where he examined international contracts for millions. Within 6 months, his feedback and proposals had brought al-Mansouri Industries $200 million worth of new business. "Tell me the whole story," Maria pressed. Hassan glanced at Grace, who now dressed in beautiful suits as a facility manager and was one of the most admired executives in the firm. She smiled, urging him to go on. 6 months prior, I was a wealthy but unhappy man. Hassan started. "I believed my money put me above other individuals. Then David showed me that true intelligence had nothing to do with where you're from, but with what you do with the opportunities you create." But how did he know it would be successful? Asked Carlos, a 13-year-old boy who now pursues programming because of the program. David glanced up at the contracts. "Since I had done research on Hassan for months, I learned that he was raised as a poor immigrant in Lebanon, came to the United States at 16 without knowing much English, and created his fortune from nothing." Hassan nodded. "David reminded me that I had forgotten where I came from. That I had become precisely the sort of person who had discriminated against me when I was young." "And now," Maria asked, "now our company is the most diverse in the industry," Grace answered with pride. "We recruit talent by competence, not zip code or last name." Hassan rose from his seat and went to a wall that showcased the certificates of the first 50 recipients of the David Johnson Young Talent Program. "Do you know what the best find I've ever had is?" "What is it?" they asked together. "That when you take a bet on gifted individuals, whether they come from where he came from or anywhere else, they don't simply improve, they make you improve as well." David shut his laptop and sat down with the group. Hassan al-Mansouri had the world in front of him, but he nearly squandered the best one, the chance to be a good person. What about you? David was asked by Carlos. Were you not scared of failure? Of course I was, David conceded. But my mother instructed me that the greatest failure is accepting to be treated as less than what you are worth. I would rather take a risk and lose everything than be invisible. Hassan gazed at David with sincere admiration. The most striking thing was not that he knew 9 languages. It was that he dared to stand up in front of a strong man, understanding that it might ruin his own family's life. But you had a strategy, correct? Maria pressed. David smiled. Always plan and always come prepared with evidence to support your cause. Grace got up. Time to leave, David. We meet Japanese investors in an hour. Hassan addressed the youth. Care to hear the highlight of the tale? David earns more than I did at his age now, not by privilege or inheritance, but by merit alone. As they strolled to the company car, a Mercedes that Grace now drove as an executive, Hassan thought about the total change in his life. David, he said, I have a confession to make. What is it? You didn't just rescue my company, you rescued my soul. David halted, walking. What are you saying? I was turning into a monster. Rich, powerful, but totally empty inside. You made me recall that real success happens when you utilize your privilege to elevate others, not bring them down. Grace kissed her son's forehead. I'm proud of you, baby, not for the money or accolades, but for the man you're becoming. And Hassan said, honored to have learned from both of you that family isn't about blood. It's about people who make you want to be better. That afternoon in the meeting with Japanese investors, David at the same time interpreted negotiations that led to a $500 million agreement. Hassan sat and recalled the day he had ridiculed that same boy. Following the meeting, a Forbes journalist approached them. Mr. Al-Mansuri, what's it like to be the first billionaire CEO to have an advisor who is 15 years old? Hassan grinned. I feel like I finally get what leadership is all about. It is not being the brightest guy in the room. It's about recognizing and nurturing the intelligence of others. And you, David, what's your advice to other young people? David thought carefully. Never let anyone define your worth based on appearances or circumstances. Your origins don't determine your destiny, and always have evidence to back up your claims. One final question, the reporter asked. Do you think this story can inspire others? Grace answered. This story confirms that if you use talent and chance combined with courage and preparation, there is nothing that cannot be done. Hassan nodded. David taught me that real wealth lies not in what you acquire, but in what you create, and that the best investment one can make is on human potential. The story of David confirms that true intelligence has no color, social standing, or age. If this journey of justice and courage has motivated you, click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that demonstrate how knowledge is the one weapon that cannot be stolen from you. Hassan attempted to humble those he felt were beneath him with his wealth, but he found that he had utterly underestimated the strength of a great prepared mind. He came to understand that real power isn't in how much money you possess, but in the people you put your money into, and that the best lesson you can learn in life is sometimes in the people you least expect.